Sleet stung like thrown gravel, needling Rowena's cheeks raw as she staggered up the black steps of the healer's hall, with one arm wrapped under the weight of her belly. Blood had dried in rust-brown scales on her skirt. Fresh blood, hot and slick, kept slipping down the inside of her thigh anyway. Her breath smoked in ragged bursts. Each inhale tasted like iron, smoke, and grief. The bronze wolf head knocker blurred in her vision. She hit it once, missed the second swing, and struck the door with her shoulder instead. "Please," she rasped. "Sanctuary." Inside, bolts slid. The door cracked open on a wedge of lantern light and sharp herbs. A novice healer in gray looked her up and down, gaze snagging on the nightshade crest still sewn to Rowena's cloak clasp. His mouth tightened. "State your lineage and sponsor," he said, voice flat from rote. Rowena laughed once, a broken sound. "My sponsor is dead." The novice's nostrils flared. He smelled the truth before he understood it. He reached for her elbow, then jerked back as if burned when another contraction seized her whole body. Pain banded her spine, crushing and merciless. Her knees buckled. "Matron!" he shouted over his shoulder. "Triage altar, now!" They got her inside and onto a stone slab veined with moonsilver. Above her, vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. The hall smelled of lavender, feverfew, wet wool, old prayers. Bells were ringing somewhere deeper in the sanctuary, low and rhythmic, as if the building itself had a heartbeat. Hands moved over her, cutting away soaked fabric, pressing cloth to her pulse points, checking the bruises around her throat where a gauntleted hand had nearly crushed her windpipe 3 nights ago. Someone touched the half-healed mating scar just below her collarbone and hissed softly. "Widowed recently," an older healer murmured. "Goddess have mercy." Rowena turned her face away. She couldn't bear those words, not with Edrin's last breath still trapped in her ears. A temple warden stepped closer, spear upright, eyes wary. "Name." "Rowena Nightshade," she said, and the room changed. She felt it happen like a pressure drop before thunder. Several attendants looked up sharply. One of them whispered, "Nightshade?" Stuart Owen declared her unfit, said she fled with enemy coin. "He declared a lot," Rowena said. Her voice came out raw with hatred and exhaustion. "My uncle declared me mad while his men butchered my mate in our own hall." The warden's jaw flexed. "Those are treason words." "They are truth." The contraction that hit then was different, deeper, vaster, as if her bones were being pried apart from the inside. Rowena clamped down on a scream and failed. Sound tore out of her throat, hoarse and thin. And then something else answered. A growl rolled through the chamber. It was not human. It was not possible. It came low and resonant, the warning rumble of a dominant wolf guarding a kill, and it came from nowhere and everywhere at once. From the stone beneath her spine, from the air above her open body, from the child not yet born. Every person in the triage hall froze. The healer at her side dropped first, knees striking stone hard enough to crack. Then the novice, then the wardens, spear points clattering as they knelt. Supplicants in the waiting alcoves sank down with bowed heads, some weeping, some whispering old words of fealty Rowena had only heard at coronations. "Voiced heir," somebody breathed. "By the moon, a sovereign heir has voiced." "No," Rowena whispered, panic and denial punching through the pain. "No prophecy, no throne, just help me." No one moved. The unborn pup growled again, shorter this time, and every flame in the wall sconces flared blue-white. The matron healer pressed her forehead to the edge of the altar. "Forgive us, lady," she said. "We did not know." Rowena tried to sit up, failed, and gripped the altar's edge until her knuckles blanched. "Listen to me." Her voice shook. "My uncle Owen Shadowfang killed Edrin. He wears my family crest and calls it law. He wants this child. If he reaches these doors..." The great bronze doors boomed, not knocked, opened. Wind knifed into the chamber carrying rain, cold, and the wild electric scent of an oncoming storm. Cloak snapped. Guard spun, hands to blades, then instantly dropped to one knee as a tall figure crossed the threshold, black coat dark with weather, silver at his shoulders catching torchlight like lightning on steel. Zephyr Stormborn, Alpha King of the Western Pax, walked into the healer's hall as if it were a battlefield he intended to win. Rowena went still in pure animal terror. 3 nights earlier, she had still believed her home could be defended. The Nightshade Keep had smelled of pine smoke and roast meat and wet fur. Snow had come early, and Edrin had laughed while pulling shutters tight against the wind, teasing her for trying to carry wood at 8 months pregnant. "You command warriors," he'd said, taking the bundle from her arms and kissing her temple. "Command them. Stop trying to out-stubborn me." She'd swatted him, and he'd grinned that crooked grin that made her forget every political scar between their houses. Then the horns had sounded. 1 long, 2 short. The signal for returning patrol. Only it hadn't been their patrol. Masked wolves stormed the great room wearing nightshade crests painted on their armor in fresh black lacquer. Too glossy. Too new. Edrin had shoved Rowena behind him before she processed anything, his body shifting halfway in a crack of bone and muscle, claws out, canines bared. "Run!" he snarled over his shoulder. She never got the chance. 2 masked males seized her from behind, pinning her arms so hard stars burst across her vision. She kicked, twisted, drove her heel down until she felt a foot break, but more poured in through the side doors. She screamed for the house guard. None came, because they were already bought. Owen Shadowfang strolled in last, gloves immaculate, silver hair dry despite the storm outside. He removed his mask himself and smiled at her like she was a difficult ledger entry. "Niece," he said, "you look unwell." Edrin launched at him. A blade flashed, then another. Silvered steel bit deep between Edrin's ribs while 3 wolves held him. He hit his knees, choking blood, eyes hunting frantically for Rowena. "Edrin." Her scream shredded her throat. Owen sighed. "Such noise. This is governance, child, not slaughter." "You're murdering your own blood." "I'm pruning rot." He nodded at Edrin, now collapsing face first on the stone. "He married you for claim and leverage. I'm simply correcting succession before that bastard in your belly can be used against us." The words had snapped something in her. Rowena drove her head backward into the face of the male restraining her. Cartilage crunched. She tore one arm free, reached for the ceremonial dagger at her belt, and sank it into the thigh of the second guard. He howled. She was already moving, dropping to Edrin's side, hands slicking red as she tried to press his wound shut. His eyes found hers, clouding already. "Moonflower," he whispered, using the name only he called her. "Don't let him take her." Her. Then he was gone. Rowena didn't remember deciding to bite Owen's wrist when he grabbed her hair. She remembered the taste of his blood and his roar of rage. She remembered him striking her hard enough to send her into the hearthstones, breathless and half-blind. "Chain her," he snarled. "At dawn I'll have the temple scribes witness guardianship transfer. She is grief-mad, unfit, and carrying unstable blood. I will protect the line." "Protect?" She spat blood at his boots. "You'll sell my child." His smile thinned. "I'll place the child where power returns highest yield. Unlike you, I understand duty." He ordered her confined in the East Solar with 2 wardens outside, both males she'd trained herself. She begged them through the door once, voice breaking. "Bram, Tovik, please. You know me." Silence. Then Bram, not meeting her eyes through the crack, muttered, "Orders from Steward Owen, my lady. You should rest. He says you're not yourself." Not yourself. Not yourself. Men's oldest chain for women who would not obey. By moonrise, she heard Owen in the corridor dictating forged decrees to a scribe. Rowena Nightshade, emotionally unsound, voluntarily ceding estate authority, requesting kin stewardship of unborn heir. Every word a knife. When the pain started before dawn, sharp and wrong, terror burned through the fog of grief. Too early, too violent. Stress, blood loss, maybe poison from the cup they'd forced on her. If labor came now under his roof, Owen would own the room, the witnesses, the child. So she chose motion over despair. She tore bed linen into a rope with shaking hands, tied it to a carved radiator, and climbed out the iced window into darkness, barefoot, belly dragging her center of gravity forward. Snow crust sliced her soles open. She nearly fell from the second-story ledge when another contraction ripped through her, biting her own wrist to muffle the cry. Below, the old kennel-master's hound Moth lifted her head and whined once, then trotted to the side gate and sat by the latch, as if she understood. "Good girl," Rowena whispered, fingers numb as she worked the lock. Behind her, a shout. "She's gone!" Bells exploded through the keep. Rowena ran. She stole no horse. The stables were too watched. She took the drainage gully through thorn scrub and half-frozen creek, wading thigh-deep through black water that sucked heat from her bones. Twice she heard pursuit close, male voices, hounds, the crack of branches, and twice her wolf surfaced just enough to mask scent with marsh mud and pine pitch. By noon, she crossed out of Nightshade boundary stones into disputed land where no one law held cleanly. By nightfall, sleet began, needling sideways under her torn cloak. At the second village, she begged for shelter. A woman at the inn looked at her crest, then at the patrol riders behind her, and shut the door. At the shrine road, she flagged 2 caravan guards. One spat near her feet. "Shadowfang says you're cursed," he said. "No one touches cursed wombs." At dawn of the 3rd day, she reached the Capitol Rise, seeing Healer's Hall spires through snow like pale teeth. Sanctuary. Neutral ground older than any pack oath. Her last option before collapse. Now, on the triage altar, with Zephyr Stormborn striding toward her through torchlight and kneeling wolves, Rowena's body remembered every warning ever whispered in Nightshade halls. Stormborn executes traitors before breakfast. Stormborn courts no softness. Stormborn takes what he wants and calls it order. He stopped 3 paces from her cot. Up close, he was larger than rumor, shoulders broad enough to block the doorway behind him, jaw shadowed with rain-dark stubble, storm-gold eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. His guards held back, uncertain. The room held its breath. Then the world tilted. Heat poured down Rowena's spine in a molten rush. The old mating scar near her collarbone, Edrin's mark, faded but sacred, flared sharp with pain, then cooled so suddenly she gasped. A new scent cut through blood and antiseptic, rain on stone, cedar smoke, lightning before it strikes. It wrapped around her lungs like a living thread and pulled. No, impossible. Not now. Not after. Zephyr's pupils blew wide, his entire body locked, as if some unseen force had hooked into his ribs. For one heartbeat, she thought he would lunge. Instead, the Alpha King dropped to one knee before her altar. Not to the prophecy, not to the court, to her. His voice came rough, almost wrecked when he spoke. "Mine," he said, eyes burning into hers, and hurting. Rowena's breath hitched. Grief and fury and disbelief slammed together until she couldn't tell one from another. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, desperate, recognizing, while her human heart still bled for a dead mate she had not even buried. Inside her, the unborn pup gave one last low growl at Zephyr's nearness, and then went utterly still, calm as moonlit water. The silence after that final growl was so complete Rowena could hear sleet ticking against the high stained glass windows. Zephyr stayed on one knee, chest rising once, hard, as if he had taken a blow. He did not reach for her. He did not look at anyone else in the chamber. Storm gold eyes held hers with a focus so absolute it felt like being pinned and seen at once. "Rowena Nightshade," he said, voice lower now, deliberate, speaking her full name like an oath. "Do you give permission for me to come closer?" The question hit her harder than the bond did. Kings did not ask. Alphas did not ask. Men with armies especially did not ask bleeding women on altars anything. Another tremor rolled through her abdomen, not as violent as before, but enough to make her grit her teeth. Heat licked up her spine again, not pain this time, electric, restless. The faded scar from Edrin's bite tingled, then settled. Beneath it, somewhere deeper than skin, something answered Zephyr with a pull that felt frighteningly like relief. Her wolf pressed forward, a pacing, desperate thing. Mine. Safe. Mine. Her human mind recoiled. Traitor. Too soon. Edrin is barely cold. "I had a mate," she whispered, the words fraying on the edges. "He died 3 nights ago." Zephyr's jaw flexed. Grief flickered across his face. Not ownership, not jealousy. Recognition. "I know what your scent carries," he said quietly. "Blood, smoke, and mourning." A healer near the wall made a strangled noise. "Your Majesty, if this is a true sovereign bond, by right you may claim immediate—" "No." Zephyr never raised his volume. The single word cracked across the stone anyway. He didn't look away from Rowena. "No claim rights. No legal invocation. She is under healer sanctuary and her own authority." The matron lifted her head from the altar edge, startled. "But sire, the voiced heir is not a trophy," he said. Rowena stared at him, pulse hammering. She had expected command, seizure, a royal decree wrapped in concern. Instead, he was setting his own power down in front of witnesses like a weapon he refused to draw. The air between them hummed. She could smell him too clearly now. Wet cedar, cold iron, lightning split pine. Every nerve she had left seemed tuned to him, and she hated that her body knew before her mind would permit. "Closer," she heard herself say. "1 step." He obeyed exactly. 1 step. Stopped. Another contraction tightened around her like a fist. She hissed and grabbed for the nearest edge. His hand moved on instinct, then froze inches from her wrist. "May I?" She nodded once, breathless. His fingers closed over hers. Warm, calloused, steady. The contact was a spark to dry tinder. Power skittered up her arm, her wolf shoved hard against her skin, tail high, wanting to rub scent and claim and sink into him. Rowena swallowed a sound that was half-sob. Zephyr inhaled sharply, eyes flashing fully gold for a heartbeat, before settling back to amber-ringed brown. "Moon above," he muttered, almost to himself. "It's real." Across the chamber, 2 wardens dropped their gazes as if they had witnessed something indecently intimate. Rowena pulled her hand back first, shaken by how much she wanted to lean into that heat. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm—" She had no word for it. Salvation felt obscene. "Like I'm yours." His expression went very still. "You are not mine to own," he said. "You are my mate if you choose not to reject the bond. That is not the same thing." The distinction landed in her like a stone dropped into deep water, ripples widening. At last he looked to the room. All non-essential personnel out, now. No one argued. Robes rustled, boots scraped, spears lifted. Within moments, only the matron healer, 2 senior midwives, and Zephyr remained near the altar. Even his personal guard withdrew to the corridor. As the chamber emptied, a messenger pushed through the closing door and fell to one knee, presenting a wax-sealed tube. From Nightshade territory, Your Majesty, Steward Owen Shadowfang invokes emergency kin guardianship under widow incapacity. Zephyr took the tube without opening it and handed it to the matron. Log it as contested during active sanctuary. No one acts on that decree without my seal and her spoken consent. The messenger blinked. Sire, it bears 3 witness signatures. Then 3 witnesses can be questioned. Rowena's throat tightened. Owen had moved quickly, just as she knew he would. Zephyr turned back to her. For a long beat, neither spoke. Outside, thunder rolled over the city walls. Locked in his gaze, she felt split down the center. One half-bloodied widow, one half-wolf straining toward a male she had prayed never to meet while vulnerable. Fear and desire braided so tightly she could no longer separate them. "Why kneel?" she asked at last, voice raw. "You walked in here with the kingdom at your back. Why kneel to me?" His answer came without pause. "Because you were in pain and everyone else forgot you were a person." Something in her chest, clenched since Idrin's last breath, loosened a fraction. The next hours bled together in fever and sleet-dark light. Rowena's labor stalled, then eased into irregular waves that left her shivering and drenched. The healers muttered about stress shock, overexertion, possible early onset, possible reversal if she could be brought down from panic. Zephyr remained where she could see him, at first on one knee, then seated on a low stool beside the cot, when the matron ordered her moved from triage to an inner recovery chamber lined with warded copper. He could have taken the bedside by rank. He chose the least obtrusive corner instead, close enough that she could scent him, far enough she never had to flinch from unexpected touch. When fever flushed her skin and she started shaking, the matron barked for cold cloths. The novice fumbled the basin. Zephyr took it from him, stripped off his rain-soaked gloves, and dipped clean linen himself. "Permission?" he asked. Rowena gave a weak nod. He pressed the folded cloth to her forehead with hands that had probably broken throats in battle. His touch was controlled, almost reverent. As he changed compress after compress, he spoke under his breath in an old dialect she recognized only after a moment. Nursery oaths from the mountain packs, the kind elders used to soothe frightened pups during storm season. "Roof above, rock below, breath between," he murmured. "Night can howl, den holds true, moon can hide, bond holds true. Little heart, keep your beat. Pack is near." She blinked at him through fever haze. "You know lullabies." "One," he said. "My mother sang it when lightning struck the watchtowers." "Your mother?" Rowena had heard a dozen court versions of Zephyr Stormborn's rise, none involving softness. "Died when I was 12, he said, wringing cloth into the basin. "I remember her voice anyway." The admission was plain, unadorned. He offered it like a tool, not a performance. Near midnight, painkillers and exhaustion finally dragged Rowena under. Sleep gave her no mercy. In dreams, she was back in the great room, Edrin on his knees, silver blade flashing, Owen smiling. "Not yourself, niece?" Blood pooling toward her feet, toward her child. She jerked awake with a strangled cry, clawing at the blankets. Zephyr was already standing, but he stopped himself a pace away, palms open, showing empty hands. His sword lay on the floor between them, unsheathed and deliberately out of his reach. "I'm here," he said. "No one touches you without your word." Her chest heaved. She focused on details to anchor herself. Copper ward rings, lavender smoke, Zephyr's blade lying flat across stone like a line he would not cross. She realized with a jolt that he had placed it there intentionally while she slept. "If you want me gone," he said, voice rough with held tension, "say leave, and I leave." No argument, no wounded pride, no king's temper. She swallowed, tasting old terror. Sit where I can see the door. He sat immediately in the chair opposite, body angled so both she and the entrance stayed in his line of sight. By dawn, rain had replaced sleet. A steward arrived with slate tablets and urgent requests for royal signatures. Zephyr signed none until he looked at Rowena first. When she drifted back to uneasy rest, he stepped to the threshold and gave orders in clipped tones. Assign 2 she-wolves from my personal guard to this chamber. Female only on inner ring unless Lady Rowena requests otherwise. Any decree from Shadowfang custody is to be copied, sealed, and held for audit. The steward bowed. Yes, sire. And one more thing. Have Master Carver Ilias brought to the lower workshop. The steward hesitated. For warboards? For a cradle. His voice changed on the next words. Still steel, but gentled at the edges. It will bear 2 sigils. Stormborn and Edrin Vale's housemark, as Rowena chooses. No one erases what came before. The steward's brows flicked up before discipline smoothed his face. At once. Rowena had pretended sleep through most of it. At that last order, her eyes stung. No one erases what came before. When she opened her eyes fully, Zephyr was back in the chair, elbows on knees, watching her with that same impossible patience. I heard, she whispered. I hoped you would. He didn't smile. Grief doesn't become treason because a bond appears. Her throat worked. She could not answer, so she only looked at him until the ache in her chest changed shape again. Still grief, still fear, but no longer solitary. By the next afternoon, she could stand for short stretches. The healers insisted she remain inside sanctuary wards, yet politics came anyway, as politics always did, with polished boots and sharpened words. The council chamber in the hall's east wing had been prepared in haste. Long obsidian table, wolf banner standards, brass braziers burning low. Rowena sat at Zephyr's right, not on a lower petitioner stool but in a carved chair level with his. He had arranged it before she arrived. The gesture did not go unnoticed. Neither did her belly. 7 rival alphas and 3 elder adjudicators filed in with expressions ranging from wary to openly hostile. Rain drummed the high windows. Somewhere in the city, warning bells told shift change. Alpha Korik of Redfang spoke first, voice oily with politeness. Your Majesty, with respect to your personal circumstance, the realm cannot absorb uncertainty. A pre-birth growl has not been recorded outside prophecy cycles in 2 centuries. Until blood purity and intent are verified, the Nightshade Widow should be confined for kingdom safety. Widow. Not lady. Not heir. Widow. As if Edrin's death had stripped her to utility. Before Rowena could answer, Elder Maeve snapped open a packet of parchments. We have affidavits from Steward Owen Shadowfang attesting to Lady Rowena's instability, violent outbursts, hallucinations, fleeing lawful kin oversight. It may be kinder to place her in quiet seclusion until birth. There it was again. Not yourself, but in prettier script. Rowena felt heat creep up her neck. She set both palms flat on the table to hide the shake in her fingers. My uncle murdered my mate. Korik gave a thin smile. Allegedly. Grief can distort memory. Zephyr had been motionless through the opening exchanges, fingers steepled before his mouth. At Korik's last sentence he rose. Power rolled off him in a physical wave. Bones shifted under skin with wet, cracking pops. His hands lengthened, nails blackening into claws. Canines dropped over his lower lip. His eyes went pure storm gold. Half shifted, he looked less like a king than a controlled natural disaster. Choose your next words with care, he said, and even the braziers seemed to burn lower. Any alpha who speaks of caging my mate again will lose title and tongue before sunset. No one breathed. Elder Maeve recovered first, bristling. Your Majesty threatens council under sanctuary law? I enforce it. Zephyr planted both clawed hands on the obsidian table and leaned in, voice a lethal quiet. She entered Healer's Hall blooded and hunted. Neutral ground protects her autonomy. You will address her as Lady Rowena Nightshade, and you will not weaponize widowhood as procedure. A murmur skated around the table, outraged and frightened in equal measure. Then old Lord Hadric, who had sat silent until now, pushed back his chair with a scrape and stalked around the table toward Rowena. If she is unstable, she should not be seated at judgment depth, he snapped. Girl, stand aside and let your betters. He reached for her arm. Zephyr moved before thought. One moment he was at the head of the table. The next he stood between Rowena and Hadric, catching the elder's wrist mid-grab with a grip that made bone creak. A snarl ripped from his throat, low and thunderous. Protocol shattered. Kings did not step down from position during active council. He did. Hadric's face drained. Unhand me. When she asks, Zephyr said, not when you demand. Rowena rose slowly behind him, pulse pounding. She could see Hadric's tendons trembling in Zephyr's hold, could smell the sharp sweat of sudden fear. Apologize, Zephyr said. Hadric spat near Zephyr's boot. To a hysterical... Zephyr tightened his grip a fraction. Hadric yelped, knees buckling. Apologize, Zephyr repeated, or I remove this hand from your arm and feed it to the court hounds. The chamber had gone dead silent except for Rain and Hadric's ragged breathing. At last the elder choked out, My apologies. Lady Rowena. Zephyr held him one heartbeat longer, then released. Hadric stumbled back, clutching his wrist, fury and humiliation warring on his face. Rowena stepped to Zephyr's shoulder before he could return to his chair. Her voice carried clean and cold across the table. You will all hear me now. Owen Shadowfang forged decrees while Edrin's blood was still wet on my hall stones. He seeks guardianship of my child through fraud. Any counsel that echoes his language serves his treason, whether by malice or cowardice. She let that sit. Question me, test evidence, audit signatures, but no one here will call me mad to make me manageable. Coric looked away first. Elder Maeve gathered her parchments with rigid fingers. Then we request formal inquiry, she said tightly. You'll have one, Zephyr said, voice human again though his claws remained. Open hearing, full witness summons. Until then, Rowena remains free, armed and under my protection by her consent alone. He turned, meeting Rowena's gaze as if to underline the last phrase. By her consent. Something fragile shifted inside her then, not surrender, not trust entire, but the first deliberate lowering of her guard. A choice, not a reflex. She touched Zephyr's forearm once, light as rain. By my consent, she said clearly for the room to hear. His shoulders eased a fraction, the nearest thing to relief she had seen on him. Across the chamber, 3 counselors exchanged grim looks. The war for narrative had begun, and Owen's lies had finally met resistance in open light. Rowena lifted her chin, storm scent and lavender in her lungs, and did not look away. She held the gaze of every wolf at that table until chairs scraped and bodies began to move again. No one met her eyes for long. Coric left first, muttering to his adjutant. Elder Maeve gathered her scrolls as if each one weighed a stone, and passed Rowena with a curt nod that was not respect, but no longer dismissal. Hadric kept his injured wrist tucked to his chest and avoided the center aisle entirely. Only when the chamber had mostly emptied did Zephyr let his half-shift recede. Claws shortened, fangs withdrew. The storm gold in his eyes dimmed back to ember brown, though tension still rode his shoulders like drawn wire. A man Rowena hadn't noticed before detached himself from the shadow of a banner pole and approached with a limping gait. Gray braid, one blind eye, scent of vellum and wolf steel. Zephyr inclined his head. Vero, my king. The older wolf gave Rowena a shallow bow. Lady Nightshade. Speak, Zephyr said. Vero set 3 sealed packets on the obsidian table. Intercepts from the South Courier Road, all bearing Shadowfang wax. 2 were carried by hired crows from enemy border camps. 1 by a temple runner wearing healer colors. Rowena's skin prickled. Read them. Varro broke the first seal and scanned fast. To Warlord Sarek of the Ash Marches, Steward Owen offers temporary guardianship transfer of a voiced sovereign infant in exchange for armed recognition of his regency claim over Nightshade and favorable passage rights through river forts. Silence struck hard. Zephyr's voice went flat. He offered my unborn daughter to an enemy warlord as trade goods. Likely more than one warlord, Varro said. He opened the second letter. To Baroness Ilra, Black Fen Compact. Terms. Infant delivered alive at first moon after birth. Bound by blood chain right to prevent maternal reclamation. Payment split between claimant factions to fracture Stormborn authority from within. The room seemed to tilt under Rowena's feet. She gripped the table edge until her knuckles paled. Blood chain. Ancient, outlawed in 3 kingdoms, still whispered in back halls where men treated lineage like livestock. A ring forged from blood and silver, heated and pressed at the infant's wrist while kin oaths were spoken. Once bound, challenge law became a maze of technicalities and delay, long enough to move a child beyond reach. Varro unfolded the final page more slowly. This one is internal. To Apprentice Lark, Hall Level 3 Dispensary. Instructions. Alter labor draft to induce hemorrhage and delirium. Phrase included. If mother dies in birthing fever, guardianship contest simplifies. The world narrowed to a high, thin ringing in Rowena's ears. Zephyr was already moving. Seal the dispensary, quietly, bring Lark alive. Varro nodded. I anticipated that order. He's under guard in the archive antechamber. Says he only took coin to report your condition, my lady. Claims no poison has yet been delivered. Yet, Rowena repeated, tasting bile. Varro dipped his chin. There's more. Shadowfang has been spreading a second story through taverns and market criers. That your mate, Edrin Vale, died in a skirmish against Stormborn outriders. That your accusation is grief projection designed to hide your collusion with this court. It was so audacious Rowena almost laughed. Instead, a cold fury settled low and steady in her belly. He means to isolate me from every memory witness, she said. If enough people repeat a lie, he can call truth disputed. Varro's one good eye softened with something like pity. That appears to be the strategy. Zephyr looked at her, jaw tight. We can crush the rumor with proclamation. No. Rowena shook her head once. Proclamations sound like kings protecting kings. He wants that. He wants me to look managed. Then what? She met his stare. Open inquiry. Public. With named witnesses and cross oath. Drag his scheme into daylight where everyone can smell it rot. Zephyr held her gaze for a beat, then nodded. Done. Varro slid another slate forward. One warning, Lady Nightshade. Owen's danger isn't only forged ink. He still has men in temple livery. He has coin in healer circles. He has kin loyalty from wolves who hate Stormborn more than they fear treason. I know what he has, Rowena said quietly. I was raised in his house. As if summoned by the words, thunder cracked over the city. Rain lashed the stained glass. Somewhere down the hall, a novice cried out, quickly shushed. Zephyr put a hand flat on the table between them, close, but not touching. Then we strip him of shadows. Starting now. By dusk, the hall had become a fortress pretending to be a sanctuary. Female guards in Stormborn blue rotated inner posts. Temple wardens were re-vetted by scent and blood prick oath at every corridor junction. The dispensary was locked, inventory recounted twice. Apprentice Lark sobbed through his questioning, swearing he had only switched labels on 2 vials and had not yet delivered the altered draft to Rowena's room. Rowena listened to all of it from a side chamber while midwives pretended not to stand between her and every cup. She should have felt safer. Instead, pressure mounted with each report. Owen was not a blade to dodge once. He was a net tightening thread by thread. The bond did not help. It pulsed at the edge of her awareness all evening, an ache when Zephyr moved too far away, a flare of heat when he stepped back into range. Every time his scent cut through incense and wet wool, her wolf lifted her head as if hearing a distant call. Attraction braided with fear until both felt like hunger, and guilt came teeth first behind it. At second bell, she paused outside a narrow cloister overlooking the rain courtyard and heard two visiting clerks whispering behind a pillar. Of course Stormborn killed the first husband. Hush. Think. Convenient widow, prophecy pup, instant bond. Too neat. Rowena stood very still until they noticed her and blanched. Neither apologized before scurrying away. Too neat. She pressed her palm against the old mark near her collarbone. Idrin's scar, half faded, half sacred. Memory rose sharp as cut glass. His laugh, his last whisper, "Don't let him take her." And now Zephyr's voice layered over it. No claim rights, no legal invocation. She hated that strangers could twist both men into weapons against her. A contraction tightened low and brief, enough to steal her breath. She waited it out against cold stone, then straightened as footsteps approached. Zephyr stopped 2 paces away, taking in her face in one glance. Pain? Not active, just warning. She forced her hand from the wall. Your clerks think you murdered my mate. His expression closed. I heard that one reached the kitchens. And I had 3 criers flogged in my 20s for repeating unverified battlefield deaths. He exhaled through his nose. I'm trying very hard not to do that again. Despite herself, a strained laugh escaped her. It hurt, but it was still a laugh. He softened a fraction. Rowena, I know you didn't do it. She cut in quickly, then flinched at how desperate she sounded. My wolf knows. My body knows. My grief just lags behind. I can wait for grief. His voice was quiet. I cannot replace what you lost. I won't compete with a dead man. Rain hissed through the courtyard grates. She looked at him, really looked. At the fatigue darkening under his eyes, at the controlled stillness he wore like armor because one wrong move around her would become another story Owen could sell. You're under pressure too, she said. He gave a humorless half-smile. My counsel thinks I'm bewitched. Border alphas think I'm compromised. Half the court thinks I'll chain you to prove strength, and the other half thinks I've already gone soft because I haven't. And what do you think? He met her gaze without flinching. I think if I lose you before you choose freely, I deserve to lose everything else. The bond tugged, fierce enough to make her fingers curl. She looked away first, unsettled by the rawness of it. Before she could answer, Varro appeared at the corridor mouth. Report from outer gate. 6 mourners from Nightshade territory request entry to pay respects for Edrin Vale. Temple papers valid on first pass, but 1 seal bled wrong under heat test. Zephyr's head snapped up. Hold them at second ward. Varro nodded. Already done. Rowena's pulse kicked. Mourningkin. Could be genuine, Varro said. Could be blades in black cloth. Both, Rowena said bitterly. With Owen, it's usually both. Zephyr's attention returned to her. You should go back to your chamber. Don't confine me in different words. His jaw tightened, then eased. Walk with me then, under guard. She nodded once. Pressure. Everywhere. Night settled thick and wet over the hall. In the lower workshop, lamplight pooled gold over cedar shavings and carved rails. Master Ilias had long since gone to his cot, but he'd left the unfinished cradle on trestles beneath a wool cover. Rowena found it by scent before sight. Fresh-cut wood, resin, and faintly, both males tied to her life by blood and bond. Zephyr lifted the cover back. The cradle was still rough at the corners, one rocker not yet smoothed, but the side panels were already etched. Stormborn lightning on one end, and on the other, Edrin Vale's crescent and thorn sigil, precise enough to make Rowena's throat close. She reached out, tracing the crescent with a trembling fingertip. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes," Zephyr said. "I did." She turned toward him. "Why?" "Because history is not a threat to me." He leaned one hip against the workbench, keeping distance as always. "Because your daughter will ask where she came from. She should inherit truth, not edited comfort." Rowena swallowed hard. "No one in my family ever said that sentence." "Then your family was poorer than they looked." A small sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh again. "You're terrible at gentleness." "I'm learning under duress." She stared at the carvings until the blur in her eyes steadied. "Edrin used to talk to my belly when he thought no one heard. He'd list things he'd teach her: how to track in snow, how to cheat at fox and hounds, how to whistle through acorn caps." Her smile broke. He couldn't whistle at all. Zephyr listened without interruption, face open in a way she had not seen in council. When she fell quiet, he said, "Tell me one thing he wanted most for her." Rowena closed her eyes. "Choice." He said power without choice is just a prettier cage. For a long beat, neither moved. Then Zephyr stepped closer, slow enough she could refuse, and held out his hand. "May I?" She placed her hand in his. Warmth surged through the bond, not the wildfire shock of first contact this time, but a deep, steady current that eased some knots she had carried for days. Their joined hands rested on the cradle rail between two sigils, old life and possible life, touching under her palm. "I was mated once," Zephyr said quietly. Her head jerked up. "You were?" He nodded. "At 19. Political pact." She didn't survive the winter fever. The bond snapped before it ever fully rooted. His mouth thinned. "Court said it proved I was favored by war spirits, spared domestic weakness." Rowena's fingers tightened around his. "That's monstrous." It was convenient. He looked down at their hands. "I learned early that if I did not harden first, others would do it for me." The confession settled between them, fragile and human. She lifted her free hand and, after the smallest hesitation, touched the line of an old scar along his jaw. He went absolutely still. "Thank you," she said, "for not asking me to heal on your schedule." "Thank you," he answered, voice roughening, "for not running when I walked in." She leaned her forehead briefly against his shoulder. Not possession, not surrender. Rest. He did not move except to breathe. Somewhere above them, bells chimed third watch. Rain had thinned to mist. For one suspended moment, the world felt almost survivable. Then a runner pounded down the workshop stairs, breathless, skidding on sawdust. "My king, Lady Rowena, urgent from infirmary level." They sprang apart. "What happened?" Zephyr snapped. The runner swallowed. Apprentice Lark tried to bite through his tongue during questioning. Before he blacked out, he said, "Moonrise draft already sent." He named midwife Tessa as recipient. Rowena's stomach dropped. Tessa had been assigned to her chamber at dusk. Zephyr was already moving. "Seal the birthing wing. No one in or out without my mark." The runner hesitated, face ash-white. "There's more." Outer ward took steel. The nightshade mourners drew hidden blades during rescreen. 2 dead wardens. One escaped into the lower halls in Temple Grey. Rowena felt the pup inside her roll hard, a warning twist followed by a contraction so sharp she doubled over. Zephyr caught her elbow, waiting for the nod before supporting her weight. "Breathe. With me." She breathed once, twice, pain cresting and dropping. "Get me to my chamber," she said through clenched teeth. "Now." They ran. Corridors blurred, lamps, shouting guards, copper ward rings flashing as they passed. At the birthing wing entrance, two she-wolves stood over a body in healer robes, throat torn open, temple token missing. Inside Rowena's chamber, midwife Tessa lay bound and gagged beside the hearth, eyes wild with fury and fear. A tray sat on the bedside table, steaming herbal draught in a blue-glazed cup stamped with healer sigil. The matron healer, pale and shaking, held a silver testing needle over the cup. The metal blackened on contact. "Nightshade root concentrate," she said hoarsely, "and powdered silverthorn, enough to trigger labor collapse and bleed out." Zephyr's snarl was pure animal. Rowena stared at the cup, then at Tessa, then down at her belly as another contraction slammed through her, longer this time, dragging a cry from her throat before she could bite it back. The matron caught her shoulders. "That one was real. We need to move you to a secured birthing room now." "No." Rowena gripped the matron's sleeves, breathing hard. "Where's Vero?" "On the lower stairs hunting the infiltrator." A horn blast split the corridor outside, 3 short, 1 long. Gate summons. A guard shoved through the door, blood on her cheek. "Message from outer court. Owen Shadowfang arrived under challenge banner with 12 sworn witnesses. He demands immediate transfer hearing before birth under kin regency law." Of course he had timed it to the minute. Poison inside, blades in the halls, legal seizure at the gate. Critical pressure snapped into clarity in Rowena's mind. She straightened through the pain, face going cold and hard as winter iron. "He wants me panicked, hidden and handled." Another contraction started, brutal, undeniable. She bared her teeth against it and looked at Zephyr. "Get me upright." He froze for half a heartbeat, reading her expression, then nodded once. Outside, thunder rolled. Above the city, clouds parted just enough for the blood moon's red rim to show. And in Rowena's chamber, with poison on her table and labor beginning in earnest, the war stopped being covert. Rowena's chamber with poison on her table and labor beginning in earnest, the war stopped being covert. "Get me upright." Zephyr's hand slid to the small of her back, the other bracing her forearm only after she gripped him first. The contraction hollowed her out from spine to thighs, but she rode it standing, teeth bared, breath sawing. The matron healer stared at her as if she had gone mad. "Lady. No, you need a warded bed, hot water, containment." "Containment is what he wants." Rowena forced the words through the pain. "If I hide while he waves challenge banners outside, he wins the story before the child crowns." The blood moon's red light pushed through the high windows in a wash the color of old wounds. Horns sounded again from the outer court. Zephyr's face was thunder carved into flesh. "Challenge law binds me if he invokes kin regency before witnesses. I can contest, delay, tear apart his evidence. Delay gives him time to plant more lies." Rowena turned to the guard in the doorway. "How many packs are in the outer court?" "Most of council, my lady." Gate summons pulled every ranking witness still inside the hall. "Good. Let them all hear." Another contraction tightened. Rowena bent, palm flattening over her belly. The pup rolled hard beneath her skin, ferocious and alive. "Mine to protect," she thought, "mine to speak for." When the pain eased enough to think, she straightened and looked at the matron. "Bring the poisoned cup, bring the testing needle, bring Apprentice Lark if he's conscious enough to talk." The matron blinked. "You intend to present evidence?" "I intend to prosecute." Zephyr's gaze sharpened. He understood before anyone else did. "Moon Court challenge," he said quietly. "Law older than kings. Blood could call blood to answer in public before the oath stone. No ruler could silence it. No steward could evade behind forged signatures. Once invoked, the accused had to stand and answer to the injured heir directly." The matron crossed herself with healer's silver. "You are in labor." "Yes," Rowena said, And my uncle should have considered that before trying to poison my birth. A flash of savage approval lit Zephyr's eyes, not triumph, respect. He turned and barked into the corridor. Varro, assemble court in the lower moon atrium. Full witness ring. No one leaves. Any blade drawn before challenge sanction loses the hand that holds it. Varro's answering voice came from somewhere below, sharp as steel. Done. The matron still hesitated. If you collapse, then I collapse on the oath stone where everyone can see who put me there. That ended it. The old healer drew herself up, rage replacing fear. Very well, Lady Nightshade. If we do this, we do it properly. She shoved the blackened cup into a satchel, snatched up the silver test needle, and pointed at two midwives. You, with me, you, fetch the apprentice, and someone get her a cloak. No cloak, Rowena said. All eyes swung to her. My bruises stay visible, so does the blood. Zephyr made a rough sound low in his chest, half protest, half reverence. You do realize every wolf in that atrium will smell your pain. Good, she said. Let them choke on it. They moved. The lower moon atrium had been built before the palace above it, a circular court sunk into bedrock and open at the center to the sky. Rain had ceased, leaving the stones slick and shining. The blood moon hung directly overhead, red light spilling through the oculus onto the white-veined black of the oath stone at the court's heart. Packs ring the chamber 3 deep. Counselors, wardens, healers, temple clerks, wolves in mourning black, and wolves in war braids. Murmurs ricocheted from the curved walls until Rowena entered, and they broke apart into stunned silence. She walked in barefoot, one hand under her belly, the other gripping Zephyr's forearm only long enough to descend the last steps. Then she let him go, and crossed the floor, under her own power. At the opposite end of the atrium stood Owen Shadowfang in dark, formal leathers, silver hair immaculate, grief cloak pinned with the nightshade crest. The sight of him hit like a blade under the ribs. He looked exactly as he had in her hall after Edrin bled out. Composed, dry-eyed, offended by inconvenience. He spread his hands as if welcoming her to dinner. Niece, thank the moon. You've been unwell. I came to bring you home before these people exploit your condition. A hiss rippled through the crowd at his gall. Rowena kept walking until she stood before the oath stone. The contraction that seized her then nearly dropped her to one knee. Breath punched from her lungs. Somewhere behind her, Zephyr shifted a half-step forward, and the ward judges raised their staffs in warning. Challenge law. He could not touch the accused. He could not strike first. He could not save her from choosing. Good. When the pain loosened, Rowena took the obsidian birthing knife from where she had hidden it in the sash at her spine. Gasps sounded. She sliced her palm open without looking away from Owen. Blood hit the oath stone with a sharp, wet pat. I invoke Mooncourt, she said. The words rang larger than her voice. Silver veins in the stone flared cold blue under her blood. Every witness bowed their head by instinct, including several who had mocked her the day before. Across the circle, Owen's smile thinned for the first time. Rowena Nightshade, intoned the eldest ward judge, staff grounded to stone. State your blood and accusation. She held her bleeding hand over the stone and spoke into the red-lit air. I am Rowena Nightshade, lawful heir by birth and oath, widow of Edrin Vale, carrying living issue recognized by sovereign voice. I name Owen Shadowfang Kinslayer, oathbreaker, forger of decrees, would-be thief of my child, and conspirator in attempted murder by poison. The atrium exploded in sound, outrage, disbelief, denial, until the ward judge struck his staff, and silence slammed back down. Owen laughed, actually laughed. A dramatic speech from a grieving woman in labor. See how they use your distress, child? You need rest, not spectacle. Answer the charge, the judge ordered. Owen spread his hands wider. I deny all criminal intent. My niece fled a secure household in hysteria after her husband's unfortunate death during a loyalist scuffle. I sought emergency guardianship only to preserve lineage. As for poison, preposterous. Rowena turned. Matron. The old healer strode forward and held up the blue-glazed cup. Taken from Lady Rowena's chamber not 1/4 hour ago, marked for labor use. She dipped the silver test needle into the liquid before all witnesses. It blackened instantly. Murmurs surged. Nightshade root and silverthorn, the matron said, lethal in active labor. Owen did not even glance at the cup. Planted. Conveniently discovered once I arrived. Bring Lark, Rowena said. Varro pushed an apprentice into the witness ring. Lark's lip was bloodied, wrists bound before him, terror pouring off him in waves. He took one look at Owen and started sobbing. Tell them, Rowena said. Lark shook his head frantically. He'll kill me. He already tried, Varro said dryly. Zephyr stood at the edge of the witness circle like a storm held on a chain, every muscle taut, saying nothing. Letting Rowena lead. Lark crumpled. The letters came through Steward Marks, he babbled. Payment, too. I was told to switch the labor draft labels and report when contractions started. I never saw Lord Owen himself, but the courier said the phrase, said if the mother died in birthing fever, the guardianship contest simplifies. Owen snapped. A bribed coward's word means nothing. Rowena stepped toward him through another contraction, pain making her vision pulse at the edges. Then let your own ink speak. Varro handed the intercepted letters to the ward judge, who read enough aloud to send a collective growl through the chamber. Warlord names, trade terms, blood chain right, infant delivered alive. At that, even Alpha Coric looked sick. Owen's pleasant mask cracked. Forgery, stormborn trickery. Rowena laughed, low and vicious. You forged decrees before my mate was cold, and now every document you dislike is counterfeit? Shall we scent test the wax? Compare your steward cipher? Or ask why men dressed as mourners killed temple wardens at your arrival? Something flashed in Owen's eyes then, calculating, cornered, murderous. And Rowena knew. He had not come to argue. He had come to create enough confusion to seize her in the chaos. She shifted her stance just as his right hand twitched toward his sleeve. Blade! Someone shouted. Owen moved with the speed of long-practiced treachery, a silvered dagger sliding from his cuff straight toward Rowena's belly. The atrium detonated. Zephyr lunged and was checked by ward staffs crossing before him in a blaze of challenge light. He hit the magical barrier with a roar that shook dust from the old stones. Guards shouted. Wolves surged. The judges screamed for order that no one heard. But Rowena had already chosen. She twisted hard left, pain and pregnancy wrecking her balance, yet enough. The silvered blade missed the center of her abdomen by inches, slicing through her dress and opening a burning line along her side. Before Owen could recover, she drove the obsidian birthing knife down through his sword wrist and pinned it to the oath stone. He howled. Blood sheeted over black rock. The chamber went still around the two of them, shock freezing, even panic. Owen stared at the blade through his hand as if his own body had betrayed him. You taught me to hide steel where men call it decorative, Rowena said through clenched teeth. Another contraction crashed into her, monstrous and blinding. She used it. With a snarl ripped from somewhere older than language, she let her wolf surge halfway through her human skin. Bones shifted in brutal, partial alignment. Claws burst from her fingers, teeth lengthened, vision sharpening into silver and heat. The crowd recoiled. This was not a graceful shift. It was war and birth colliding in flesh. Owen yanked his trapped arm free with a wet tear and stumbled back, clutching the ruin of his wrist. He drew a second blade with his offhand, shorter, desperate. You were always the weak branch, he spat, backing toward the witness ring. Widow, broodmare, and useful corpse. Rowena followed, limping, one hand over her belly, blood streaking her thighs and the stone behind her. Funny, she said, voice gone rough with Wolf. I remember being called obedient. He lunged again, aiming high this time for her throat. She met him. Pain sharpened everything into fragments. Silver flash, the reek of his fear. Zephyr's fury battering challenge wards. The stunned silence of wolves watching a laboring woman take her own justice. Rowena caught Owen's knife arm with both clawed hands and let his momentum turn him. He was stronger in the shoulders. She was lower, anchored by rage and the merciless center of gravity of late pregnancy. She drove forward with all her weight and slammed him onto the oath stone. The impact cracked his skull against the edge. He gasped, stunned. She did not hesitate. Her claws raked across his throat once, twice. On the second strike, flesh opened. Blood fountained hot over her hand, over the stone, over the silver vein still glowing beneath challenge law. Owen made a choking sound, eyes wild, blood bubbling between his lips. He clawed at the wound, stared up at her, as if he still could not believe she would do this herself. You can't rule, he gurgled, what you cannot keep. Rowena leaned close enough that only he and the front ring could hear her final answer. I kept my child, my truth, and my name. You kept only your hunger. His pulse fluttered visibly in the wreck of his throat. Then it stopped. For one heartbeat, all that existed was Rowena crouched over the body of the man who had murdered her mate and tried to buy her daughter. Blood running from her palm and side and between her feet, the red moon staring down through the oculus like an unblinking witness. Then the challenge light died. The ward staffs fell aside. Zephyr reached her in 2 strides. He did not touch her first. Even then, even now, with her swaying over a corpse and labor tearing through her, he stopped one breath away and said, Rowena. The permission in her name undid her more than the fight had. Yes, she gasped. He caught her as her knees buckled. The next contraction hit with a downward force that made her cry out into his shoulder. The matron was already there, shoving aside gawking witnesses. No more theatrics, the old healer snapped, though her voice shook. The child is coming now. Zephyr gathered Rowena against his chest while guards closed around them, and Vero barked orders over the dead man at their feet. The Alpha King looked back once only. His face as he regarded Owen's body was winter without mercy. Burn him before dawn, he said. No honors, no marker. Shadowfang claim ends here. Then he turned away and carried his mate to bring their daughter into the world. Hours later, the birthing chamber was washed in moonlight and the bittersweet smell of crushed herbs. Rowena lay propped against pillows, wrung hollow and remade. Her daughter slept against her breast under a wool wrap, dark hair damp, tiny fist flexing as if she'd like to challenge the room all over again. Her first cry had indeed sounded like a snarl, making one palace guard outside the door laugh through tears and mutter, "Growl," before he could stop himself. The name had stuck instantly. Rowena touched the baby's cheek with one finger. You terrified half the kingdom before your first breath. Growl yawned without remorse. The door opened softly at Rowena's call, and Zephyr entered alone. No crown, no guards, no armor, just a dark shirt unlaced at the throat and exhaustion carved into the planes of his face. He stopped near the bed, moonlight silvering the scar at his jaw. For a moment neither spoke. The bond between them was no longer wild static. It hummed low and sure, full of blood, milk, survival, and the awe of almost loss avoided. Rowena looked down at their daughter, then back at him. Come here. He obeyed at once, but still halted within arm's reach. What do you need? Not what do you permit. Not what do I want. What do you need? Her throat tightened. Set the ward latch. He crossed to the door and slid the moon-silver bolt into place, the chamber sealed with a soft chime. When he turned back, she had shifted Growl into the cradle at her bedside, the cedar one, now complete, storm-born lightning carved beside Edrin's crescent and thorn. Their daughter settled there between histories and slept on. Rowena held Zephyr's gaze. "I'm done being hunted between names," she said. "Done being handled because others fear what I carry. I choose this bond now. Not because I'm cornered. Not because prophecy shoved us together. Because you knelt when I was bleeding and never once tried to cage me." Something fierce and unbearably tender moved across his face. She lifted a hand to the place where her old scar had half faded and still ached. "Will you mark me, Zephyr Stormborn?" His breath caught audibly. "Yes," he said, rough as gravel and thunder. Then, because he was who he was, "Only if you are certain." Rowena's answering smile was tired and sharp and wholly her own. "I just killed my uncle in labor, I'm certain." A laugh broke out of him, startled and helpless. It turned to reverence just as fast. He came to the bedside and, before touching her, went to his knees. Then he bared his throat to her. The gesture hit harder than any grand speech. Submission, offered by a king with no audience to impress. "Mine," he whispered, not as possession, but as wonder. His eyes lifted to hers. "Yours, mate." "Mine," she answered, pulse leaping. "Yours, mate." She tipped her chin, exposing the tender junction of neck and shoulder. Zephyr's fingers framed her jaw, warm and shaking just enough for her to feel it. He brushed his mouth over the old scar first, a kiss more than a claim, honoring what had been. Then his teeth pressed in. Pain came bright and precise, a hot spear through skin, enough to arch her spine and tear a gasp from her chest. The bite deepened with reverent certainty, fangs sinking where pulse beat wild beneath his mouth. For one suspended instant, pain was all there was. Then the bond opened. Pleasure hit like storm water through a breached dam. Heat flooded from the mark down her chest, through her belly, into every exhausted limb. Rain and cedar filled her lungs. Night bloom magic unfurled under her skin, cool and velvety against the electric force of his storm. The half-healed scar from her first mating mark pulsed once, twice, and seemed to melt into the new wound, not erased, but woven in. Grief transformed into living pattern. Rowena cried out, one hand tangling in his hair, the other gripping the sheets. Power spiraled around them in visible threads, silver, deep indigo, gold-white like lightning inside moonwater. The candles guttered and flared. In the cradle, Growl gave a tiny, approving grunt and slept on. Zephyr released the bite slowly and licked the mark once, sealing it. His forehead dropped to her shoulder as if the force of the completed half-bond had staggered him too. "Moon, save me," he whispered against her skin. Rowena slid her fingers under his jaw and lifted his face. His pupils were blown wide, throat bare where he had offered it. "My turn," she said. He nodded without hesitation. She pulled him closer and turned his head. The side of his neck smelled of iron, rain, male heat, and the clean edge of fear. Not fear of her hurting him, but fear of wanting too much. It made something in her chest go soft and fierce. She bit. His whole body jolted. A rough sound broke from him, half growl, half groan, as her teeth sank into his throat. She tasted salt, blood, storm. The mark took with a pulse of answering power that shot through her so hard her vision flashed white. Pleasure rolled through them both this time, mutual and rising, pain transforming into a molten, shivering flood. She felt his memories brush hers in fragments, watchtowers in lightning, a mother's song, years of iron self-control, the exact instant he saw her on the triage altar and knew. He felt hers in return, Edrin's laughter by the hearth, snow under bleeding feet, Owen's smile over betrayal, the terrible, fierce love when their daughter first touched her skin. No cages, the bond said. No erasing. Chosen. She released him slowly. Two fresh marks throbbed between them like twin stars. Zephyr climbed carefully onto the bed beside her when she tugged him down. He gathered her into his arms with infinite caution, as if she were both breakable, and the strongest thing he had ever held. Forehead to forehead, breath shared, they let the bond settle. It was different now. Not a frantic pull. Not ache. A deep-seated rightness, warm in marrow. His storm no longer battered at her edges. It curled around her night bloom magic and rested there. Her wolf, for the first time since Edrin died, stopped pacing. No cages, Rowena whispered. No erasing, Zephyr answered. No fear. Only chosen loyalty, he said, until moon and marrow end. They stayed like that a long time, holding each other while their daughter slept in a cradle carved with both past and future. Dawn broke gold over wet stone. In the great audience court, packs gathered again, but this time not for accusation, for law. Rowena stood on the dais in deep midnight blue, Growl strapped snug against her chest in a soft wrap embroidered with lightning and crescent thorn. The baby was awake now, glaring solemnly at the assembly as if evaluating everyone's fitness to remain alive. At Rowena's right stood Zephyr in formal black, one hand resting lightly at the small of her back. At her left, the matron healer held a scroll case while Vera waited below the steps with one blind eye fixed on the room for trouble that would not come. The pyre smoke from Owen Shadowfang's body still faintly scented the morning air. "Read it," Rowena said. The matron broke the seal and her old voice carried beautifully across the court. By decree of the United Stormborn and Nightshade Crowns, no child may be claimed, transferred, or bound through coercive blood right under penalty of death and forfeiture of lands. No widow or mated female heir may be stripped of legal autonomy by male kin on grounds of grief, pregnancy, or alleged instability without open moon court review and her present voice. A murmur rose. Shock, approval, some outrage quickly swallowed. Rowena stepped forward herself. Healer sanctuaries are henceforth neutral ground by crown protection. Any hand raised in violence within them answers to me. Korik bowed first, fist to chest. Red Fang acknowledges. One by one the others followed, even Elder Maeve, even a chastened Hodrick with his wrist still wrapped. Varro knelt on the lower step. "High Queen," he said formally, voice rough with age and satisfaction. "The revised succession ledgers await your seal." The title landed in the room and held. Not consort, not decoration. Rowena looked at Zephyr. He did not speak for her. He only held out the signet. She took it and pressed black wax onto the decree. "I accept," she said. A tiny sound came from the wrap at her chest, more rumble than coo. Guards along the hall grinned openly. Zephyr glanced down. "Your daughter appears to approve legislation by Growl." "Excellent," Rowena said dryly. "A family tradition." Laughter, startled and real, moved through the court. The last of the tension broke. Later, when ceremony gave way to sunlight, Rowena crossed the palace training yard with Growl strapped to her and a practice blade in hand. Wolves ringed the yard at a respectful distance, pretending not to watch. Zephyr leaned against the fence in shirt sleeves, on watch and off throne for once, storm mark visible above his collar where she had bitten him. "Again," he called. Rowena smirked and swung at the post target, splitting the painted center cleanly. Growl, jostled by the motion, gave a tiny, satisfied snarl. The yard erupted in cheers. Zephyr laughed, full and unguarded, and pushed away from the fence to come to them. He kissed Rowena's marked shoulder in passing, then tapped one finger under Growl's chin. You, little terror, are banned from council until you can speak in full words. Growl blinked at him with grave disdain. Rowena laughed, really laughed, the sound bright enough to startle birds from the eaves. Zephyr looked at her as if he still could not believe he had lived to hear that sound and be part of what made it possible. Scarred, blooded, marked by grief and chosen love alike, they stood in the clear morning with their daughter between them and a kingdom remade under their hands. No betrayer would ever steal this future again.